Hello everybody, welcome to the Flying Bible. It is the day after the Sabbath. Jesus was crucified, he was buried, and come to find out, on the first day of the week that tomb was empty. So we are going to do some resurrection barnstorming with Jesus today. And today we are flying in the Aviat Pitts Special S2S, a stunt biplane kind of reminiscent of the Red Baron. So we are doing some barnstorming and some crazy flying with this, because thinking about the resurrection is an awfully crazy thing and would have been a crazy time in the life of his disciples. So very early on that first day of the week, when the sun had risen, Mary Magdalene, Mary mother of James, Salome went to the tomb, and they found that something was strange about the tomb. The stone, which was large, had already been rolled back, and they saw this young man dressed in a white robe who said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. Go, tell his disciples and Peter that he's going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you." Now, as far as our flight today, we're going to go ahead and drop by the area of Bethany right now, because in the resurrection stories we find in Luke that Jesus led them out as far as Bethany and lifted up his hands and blessed them. But things bounce around a little bit in the gospel stories when you go gospel to gospel, and so it's not as clear cut as we would like it to be. So in the same way, we're going to bounce a little bit from gospel to gospel as we take a look at the resurrection. Well, the Gospel of Mark mentions that Jesus appeared in another form to two of them as they were walking out in the countryside. Well, the Gospel of Luke may complement that, because two of the disciples were going out to a village called Emmaus. So perhaps that's what they were talking about in Mark. It's something just 7 miles away from Jerusalem. And while they were walking along the road, Jesus himself showed up and was talking with them. They were talking about the events that happened. And then when they were arriving at Emmaus, Jesus was just going to go on ahead. They invited him to come stay with them where they were staying. He came in the house, and there in the house in Emmaus, he sat at the table with them. He took bread, he blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. And all of a sudden their eyes were open. They recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. It's that experience at the Lord's table. They knew that experience well. In that same hour, they got up and they returned to Jerusalem. And went right back to Jerusalem. They found 11 and their companions. Go tell them all about what had happened. So we are headed back to Jerusalem before we go north to Galilee. And we're going to do some more barnstorming along the way. I have no idea what some of these towns are, but Jesus appeared for 40 days to his disciples and all around Israel. It's really hard to say where all he would have stopped. So we're just going to basically barnstorm any of the little towns and cities that we see along the way. Now we are approaching back toward Jerusalem, as you see the Temple Mount off in the distance. As we approach the Temple Mount, we'll also approach the Mount of Olives. Acts, it talks about after his suffering, he presented himself alive by many convincing proofs for 40 days. And then at this very special moment, he taught them that you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you. You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And then Jesus was lifted up into the heavens. A cloud took him out of their sight. And while his disciples were on earth, they were told to stop staring into heaven and get back to work, basically. So they returned to Jerusalem for the mount called Olivet. And we'll take one more swing by Jerusalem, sending greetings out to our Muslim brothers and sisters with a nod to Muhammad's ascension into heaven from the rock on the Temple Mount. We carry on with Jesus' resurrection. Now, when Mary Magdalene was weeping outside the tomb, she turned around, she saw Jesus standing there in the garden. She didn't know that it was Jesus, and then he said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in the Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Her world was turned upside down to have seen the Lord alive. She went and announced to the disciples, "I've seen the Lord," and this was something to turn their worlds likewise upside down. As we continue north now, we've exited the region of Judea. and into Samaria, and we're going up and down and around the hills, flying free as a bird. It's startling to imagine Jesus in his resurrected form and appearing in these places and wondering how in the world did he get to these places? How did he travel? Did he just appear? Was he flying through the skies? Who knows? But we are flying through the skies as we remember these special things. And we might even pass through a cloud, remembering how that cloud took Jesus off into the heavens to go be seated at the right hand of God. What we've done so far is journey around Jerusalem, and Mount of Olives, and Bethany, and Emmaus, and then we've come north and pass by just west of Shechem, and then go on into Galilee, to pass by the hill of Moriah and Mount Tabor, and Cana, and then on into the Sea of Galilee. When it was evening on that same day, and this was probably back in Jerusalem, the house where the disciples had met, I believe that may have been the upper room where they had the Last Supper, and Jesus came and stood among them in this room that was locked and said, "Peace be with you." He showed them his hands, his side, and his disciples saw it, they rejoiced as they'd seen their Lord once again, or their Lord who'd been killed like a common criminal, and here he was again among them. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And when he had said this about sending them, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit." In the Gospel of John, this was how Jesus gave them the Holy Spirit, that power to do Jesus' work here on earth. But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, wasn't with them when Jesus came. He'd heard about this, but he was like, "I'm not going to believe until I see his hands and his sides, until I see the scars, I'm able to touch him with my own hands." A week later, his disciples were in that house. Thomas was with them this time. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them, and he said, "Peace be with you." And he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand, put it in my side. Don't doubt. Believe." Thomas answered and realized in that moment he was awestruck. He said, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen, yet have come to believe." Talking about us who've been handed down these stories, who haven't seen him, who haven't seen Jesus in his resurrected form appearing throughout Israel, but yet have come to believe. How special a thing that is to believe simply based on the testimony that we've received. I like to think that Jesus may have done some barnstorming kind of like this, flying up and down and all around and way down low where the people are, even below these electrical wires, and then back up into the skies, up to the top of this mountain right before us, which is Mount Moriah, or the hill of Moriah. It's described in different ways. And this is, remember, right in the middle of the Jezreel Valley. We've got Mount Tabor off there in the distance. Mount Tabor is the Transfiguration Mount, which we'll drop by there here shortly as well. Drop by some more towns along the way. And I just imagine them making these journeys. First of how heartbroken they were, and then of what they'd heard, and then beginning to experience meeting with Jesus once again, who they thought had been lost. The book of Matthew describes how the 11 disciples went to Galilee, and they went to the mountain that Jesus had told them to go to, where Jesus had directed them. It doesn't say what mountain this is, but hey, let's drop by Mount Tabor, Mount of Transfiguration once more, because hey, this is a special mountain and one that really stands out in the area of Galilee. Jesus showed up and he said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me," and this is what he's passing down to us. And he said to his disciples, "Go, therefore, make disciples of all nations." He's talking about baptizing. He's talking about teaching to obey what Jesus has said, because it's about Jesus' message to love. That's at the heart of all this. And now while we're in Galilee, let's cruise on over to Cana. We haven't really visited Cana yet, and to be fully transparent, I'm not sure which one of these little towns is supposed to be Cana, or if Cana is maybe one of the dirt piles kind of nearby one of these towns, as we are talking about a place that was of Jesus' time 2,000 years ago, and Lord knows these areas and cities and places have all changed a whole lot throughout the millennia. But speaking of Cana, going back to the earlier part of the book of John, on the third day there was a wedding in Cana where Jesus and his disciples had been invited, and the mother of Jesus was likewise there with them. And turns out they ran out of wine. They didn't plan very well for the celebration. Well, when the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to them, "They have no wine." And at first Jesus was like, "Well, what do you want me to do about it?" But then he got his act together real quick and then did something about it. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim with water. But come to find out, the steward tasted the water and it had become wine. Didn't know where it came from. Not only was it wine, but it was really good wine. That left him asking, how in the world is the good wine here right now? We're supposed to serve the good wine first and then the bad wine later. But now they're finding out that after they'd already served the wine, they have a whole bunch of good wine to serve. And that's because Jesus had turned the water into the wine. Now, as we approach the Sea of Galilee, we are reminded of the end of the book of John when Jesus met his disciples up there at the Sea of Galilee, showing himself again, as it says, by the Sea of Tiberias. By the way, if you go and visit there, it's wiser to refer to it as the Sea of Tiberias, because a lot of folks up there do not know it by the name Sea of Galilee. So they were there together, gathered. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana, in Galilee, sons of Zebedee, two other of his disciples. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach. But the disciples didn't know that it was Jesus. They didn't recognize him, just like Mary didn't recognize him. And Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" And they answered, "No." They weren't catching anything. And he said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you'll find some." So they cast it, and sure enough, they weren't able to haul it in because there were so many fish in the net. And the story continues. As they'd come in from out in the water and went ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. Jesus came and took the bread, he gave it to them, and he did the same with the fish. Another experience of communion, the Lord's table with Jesus, here again on the seashore, the Sea of Galilee. Now we're coming on down to Capernaum, at least what I think is Capernaum, and it's in the right location. It's got this dark soil, and you've got this kind of black soil, rocky shore in real life, so I think maybe that's a representation of it. But when they had finished breakfast, eating the bread and the fish with Jesus, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." And then a second time Jesus said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." And he said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was getting a little irritable at this point. He's like, "Come on, don't you think I love you, Lord? You know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." Thanks for being here. Flying Bible. God bless you.